Okay, okay. Take your seats. Settle down, settle down. Welcome to the Road to Concord 101. This class is about all things connected to the path of history leading from Mount Sinai to Lexington Green and the individual liberty and freedom of man. If you're in the wrong place, feel free to get up and go see the registrar's office about dropping this class, preferably before you meet the professor. In the event you do not already know this, your professor is Joe Bakanovic, and he has a bit of a reputation on campus. He is most definitely an acquired taste, but if you can learn to tolerate him, he will make you better at defending your position, whatever it may be. I'm T.A. Charlie. I'm here to help the professor, but more importantly, you. We encourage you to take notes, and if you have questions, feel free to call. If you'd like the number, please email us. You can also post your questions in the comments, and we'll get the professor's attention. Part of my job is to let you know a little bit about your professor. As I said earlier, the professor has that bit of a reputation on campus. Not all of it is good. Let me help explain a little with a story about how I came to be the professor's TA. I was invited to attend one of his classes. My first impression of the professor was that he was an egotistical, narcissistic know-it-all. My intent after only a few minutes of class was never to attend another class with this professor. But after class, Professor Joe came up to me and thanked me for my class participation and told me that my perspective was valuable, and he asked me to keep coming to class. This actually took me back a little. To me, he seemed inconsistent. What was I to do? I decided to continue coming to his classes. As I did, I actually started doing what he does encourage students to do. Check behind him and see if what he is teaching is actually correct. I have done this over and over again, and generally speaking, I found what he teaches to be backed by sound, valid, and rational arguments from reputable sources. When I have challenged him and provided a sound, valid, and rational argument in opposition to his current position, he immediately changed his position and thanked me for correcting him. Why do I tell you all this? Professor Joe is a little rough around the edges, especially in the way he delivers his content. But if you stick with him and listen to what he teaches and then go and check his sources, you will likely find, as I did, he will help you better understand the world around you and help you to think better and hopefully to live better. At least that is our hope. One last note. This class builds on itself. Therefore, it is important to attend class regularly. We will not always have time to go over previously covered material. If you are new, we suggest you watch our older classes. We've created playlists to help you with those things we feel are of special importance. Now, let's get started.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, December 2nd, 2025. This is the Road to Concord. I am your host, Joe Bakanovic. This is the show I was thinking about doing yesterday. It's going to be a big day. Some of you, especially when this show first started, told me that I'm like drinking from a fire hose. This is going to be one of those days. I'm hoping that a lot of you have some of our previous shows under your belt. It'll be of great help if you do. I'm going to do my best in the 1 hour that we have here today to explain some of what's happening in this country right now and to knit some patterns together. It's not going to be easy to do if you haven't been here for a while. Like I put up on the blog post today, what you see happening around you today, it's not chaos. The Road to Concord.com, Color Revolution, Class 569, recognizing patterns in the ongoing attempt to destroy America. Color Revolution. It's not chaos. It's not law. Well, it is lawlessness, but it's not lawlessness in the sense that everything's been thrown to the wind. There are recognizable patterns in the events unfolding within the United States, but you have to know what is happening and why it's happening before you can see and understand those patterns. Today's show will attempt to explain some of what you are seeing and tie several of the pieces of the story together so that the pieces can be more readily recognized and understood as a complete whole. And then there are the show notes for today's class. What I want to go over with you real quick, though, is I've had people in the past, I've tried to explain this to them, and they dismiss me as a conspiracy theorist. The big question is always, who are the they, Joe? Who are the they? These they you keep talking about. Well, to be honest with you, a lot of them we're never going to know, at least not while they're alive. But we have some of the historic figures who started this and created or fleshed out the ideology and the quote unquote theory that's behind the movements, their movements. And we know a lot of their operatives, modern day operatives, the boogeymen. And I'm going to introduce you to some of them here shortly. But now there seems, to the casual observer who wants to pay no attention to this or who has never really taken the time to seriously consider what I'm going to present to you today, to research it for themselves, it's easy for them to dismiss. They look at the world and they say, there's no plan here. There's no coherent plan. There's no chaos. There's no pattern. This is all just coincidence. Now, in large part, this is due to ignorance. Whether willful or not, it doesn't matter. It's ignorance. But there are patterns in history. And if you know the historic patterns, you can see them playing out today in the events of today. They form a mosaic. Have you seen the picture of the Twin Trade Towers before they were brought down? And it's made up of pictures of all the people who died that day when you look close. Well, that's what this is. It's a picture that you can't really see until you get far enough back. Otherwise, it all just looks like many seemingly different and independent things, to the casual observer, and they'll see no connection. But it does form one big picture. And in order for me to explain this to you, we have to think like an intelligence analyst. You're not going to find, quote unquote, hard proof that you can always, necessarily take into a courtroom. You have to look at the preponderance of the evidence and look to see whether or not it fits. Does the piece fit your theory, your operative working theory of explaining what's going on, why, and how? If the pieces fit, you hold to it. Sometimes you have to modify your theory along the way, but that's generally how this works. So what I want to show you is some of the original players. We all know Woodrow Wilson. If you've been any part of this show for any length of time, and an audience member, you know this man. I do not like him. Woodrow Wilson believed that the state should be viewed as an organism and that it could be scientifically engineered to conform to our desires. And I put scientifically in quotes there. Much the same way that animals are bred for different purposes. Literally, he saw it this way. Furthermore, he rejected revolution, violent in revolution, in favor of incrementalism, which he dubbed progress or progressivism. It actually goes back to at least Maximilian, a Roman general. And he wanted communism or socialism or some form of it. He was enamored with what was going on in Europe at the time. He wanted that for the United States, and he knew that the American people wouldn't accept it the way that Europe was swallowing it. So he's going to sell it to us as progress through incremental steps. It's the same goal, different approach. So instead of revolution, he advocated an elite bureaucracy of unelected, independent, quote unquote, scientists, all trained by the same elite universities. This ruling elite would infiltrate all aspects of government and social institutions to effect change from within the system. So subversion of a sort. Now, I know a lot of people will tell me, well, Joe, where is that? Let me see if I can get this down here for a second. I want to show it to you. Deep State. This is a former blog post of mine. You can find it just by Googling the Deep State. I mean, not Google it, but go to theroadtoconcord.com and right here, search the Deep State. Well, let me just show you something. I'm going to do it in order. Woodrow Wilson, from his essay, Leaders of Men, June 17th, 1890. This tells you the mentality of the man. It says, the competent leader of men cares little for the interior niceties of the people's characters. Doesn't care what you think. Doesn't care about your morals. He cares much everything for the external use to which they may be put. In other words, you're just an object. What can he do with you? His will seeks the line of least resistance. So he's not going to fight you. He's going to go try to get around you. But the whole question with him is a question of application of force. There are men to be moved. How shall he move them? He supplies the power. Others supply only the materials upon which that power operates. The power will fail if it is misapplied. It will be misapplied if it be not suitable both in kind and method to the nature of its materials upon which it is spent. But that nature is, after all, only its means. It is the power which dictates, dominates, the materials yield. Men are as clay in the hands of the consummate leader. That smacks of the scripture. We are clay in the potter's hands. This is men thinking that they are gods. And essentially what he's saying is you have to, you just acquire power so that you can then apply it to people to form them into whatever it is you want them to be. Now, this is how he planned on, this is from What is Progress, 1913, 23 years later. He says, and then in the brownish red here, it's my commentary. His words are in the gray. Well, we are architects in our time. In other words, revolutionaries of a different form. And our architects are also engineers. They think they're scientists. We don't have to stop using a railroad terminal because a new station is being built. We don't have to stop using the current government system because we're overthrowing it. We don't have to stop any of the processes of our lives because we are rearranging the structures in which we conduct those processes. In other words, they can keep using the current system while they'll infiltrate and subvert it from within. Folks, that's happening right now in this country. We're in the last phases of this. What we have to undertake is systemize the foundations of the house, subvert the foundations of the Constitution, then thread all the old parts of the structure with the steel, which will lace together in modern fashion, replace the Constitution with bureaucracies, accommodate to all modern knowledge of structural strength and elasticity. He's using this engineering language because he thinks it appeals to America. What he really means is adopt the socialist paradigm without letting the voters know what they're doing. And then slowly change the partitions, subversively by small steps, aka progressivism, steps what Maximilian called incrementalism, relay the walls, let in the light through new apertures, improve the ventilation until finally a generation or two from now, the scaffolding will be taken away, the old original system will be destroyed, and there will be the family in a great building whose noble architecture will at last be disclosed. The revolution will have been completed and the deep state revealed, where men can live in a single community, the collective ideal by whatever name, cooperative as in perfect coordination beehive, meaning Wilson believes he and his architects will have transformed human nature through government. Not afraid of any storm of nature, not afraid of any artificial storm, any imitation of thunder and lightning, knowing that the foundations go down to the bedrock of principle, and knowing that whenever they please, they can change that plan again and accommodate it as they please to the altering necessities of their lives. In short, believing man will have shown himself to be a god. These are their words, not mine. Wilson is one of the quote unquote they. So what else are we going to do here? Well, let me put that back up. I lost something here. There we go. And you got to bear with me, please. It's hard for me to run all of these things at one time here because I got several screens going on. All right. We just read this one with Wilson. Let me see if I can't continue to explain some of this to everybody. That's getting too far ahead of the game. Wilson, Blaze Media. Half of Gen Z wants AI to run the government. We should be terrified. Now, how is that connected to what Wilson just said? Well, it's easy. It's a direct result of what Wilson was arguing. You know, the scientifically organized state. Well, you no longer need bureaucracies when the scientifically created AI, which is better than us, can take over for it. So what I'm teaching people through time is to trust the state, and now the state is going to be trusted to a creation of the state, AI. because the state funded it. So we've got most of Generation Z, or at least half of it, thinking that that's a good thing. That's a direct result of Wilson's reconfiguring of our nation. We also have Margaret Sanger. I think we're missing some people here. I don't think my slide presentation is behaving itself. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to drop that. Nope, that's not going to work. Dadgummit. I hate when I do this because I try so hard before the show to make sure this doesn't happen. Margaret Sanger, along with the rest of the eugenics movement, agreed with Wilson, thinking that the perfect man could be bred. Now just bear with me. Wilson thinks that you can do it through these elites and this scientific alteration of society as a whole, like an organism. Margaret Sanger thinks the perfect man can be bred, and if he couldn't, then society could be improved on the whole by weeding out those they believe to be undesirable. In short, they sterilized and aborted people. Well, this is a quote from Margaret Sanger. Hordes of people are born who live, yet who have done absolutely nothing to advance the race one iota. Their lives are hopeless repetitions. Such human weeds clog up the path, drain up the energies and the resources of this little earth. We must clear the way for a better world. We must cultivate our garden. In other words, kill people. This is also Margaret Sanger. How are we to breed a race of human thoroughbreds unless we follow the same plan? We must make this country into a garden of children instead of a disorderly backlot overrun with human weeds. Well, she is mirroring the words of this man, George Bernard Shaw. He's a Fabian socialist in England. He says, I don't want to punish anybody, but there are an extraordinary number of people who I might want to kill. I think it would be a good thing to make everybody come before a properly appointed board, just as he might come before the income tax commissioner and say every 5 years or every 7 years, just put them there and say, sir or madam, will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little bit more than they clearly, we cannot use the big organization of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us, and it can't be of very much use to yourself. Now, he never includes himself in that. He's the us. Okay, so they're going to use eugenics and literally murder to perfect society. Wilson's going to use the scientifically conducted administrated state. He's going to use administration, government, by a ruling elite that are unappointed and unelected and unaccountable. John Dewey, he agrees with all of this as well, in general terms. However, he saw the use of public education as the proper means of affecting the socially engineered society. As Hitler would later say, Dewey sought to nationalize the whole of the people through quote-unquote education. In other words, indoctrination. To this end, he agreed with Lenin, instituting kindergarten so that he could get hold of our children at the earliest age, believing that if he could have them in their youth, he would own them their entire lives. Children, this is a quote from Dewey, children who know how to think for themselves spoil the harmony of the collective society which is coming, where everyone is interdependent. The teacher is engaged not simply in the training of the individual, but in the formation of the proper social life, teaching them what to think and what to think and what to feel. In other words, he has succeeded. Our students that are coming out that they can't do math and they can't read, but they can give you the PC liberal culture of, wokeness. That's what he wanted. He says, in this way, the teacher always is the prophet of the true God and the usherer in of the true kingdom of God. Hitler, why nationalize industry when you can nationalize the people? So why take over industry when you can take over the people? By indoctrinating them. Lenin, give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted. The younger, the better. Well, Blaze Media. Eye-opening numbers of American youth embrace Marxism and socialism and shun capitalism. They have succeeded. People who do not understand why socialism and Marxism are bad things, They were not properly educated. That's for darn sure. Not in the patterns of history. So this is Dewey. He's going to use public education system. Walter Lippmann, being a quote-unquote newsman, believed that the best way to achieve the progressive agenda was by using the media. In other words, through propaganda. Quote from him, "The public must be put in its place so that it may exercise its own powers, but no less and perhaps even more, so that each of us may live free of the trampling and the roar of the bewildered herd." So he's going to use the media to put us all in our place. Cloward and Piven came along. They still want to do this, but like Lenin, they sought to destroy the country through economic collapse. And not so much the country, but the middle class, so they could rebuild from the ruins. In large part, this is the actual goal of the welfare system. It is meant to create government dependency and at the same time bankrupting the middle class, which grows the government dependency, which more bankrupts the middle class. And all in the name of charity toward the supposed victims, the poor. Make them out to be a moral victim. They have the moral high ground here so that they can beg the middle class, who is actually working to create society, steal from them through their elected representatives. And it's all this to replace the middle class, turn them back into serfs, so the self-appointed elite can now remake society closer to their heart's content. Judges see the courts as the primary vehicle for social change. Hollywood sees movies and TV as the primary vehicle. The music industry sees music as the same thing. Corporations see themselves as the primary vehicle for change. Thus, they push DEI and the green economy on us, with none of us having ever voted for any of this. So by now you're saying, see, Joe, none of this is, there's no pattern here, Joe. None of this is coordinated. You're wrong. We'll get to that in a minute. Now comes Saul Alinsky. He also wanted socialism, but not so much because he was a true believer. Alinsky simply wanted power. And true to his Machiavellian roots, he taught that the ends justify the means. Many of his pupils are still in the highest levels of our society today, like Hillary Clinton. To him, the 8 levels of socialism were: you got to control the healthcare, you need poverty, increase the poverty level as high as possible. Poor people are easier to control and will not fight back if you are providing everything for them to live. Well, that's the welfare state, what I just explained. Debt. Increase the debt to an unstable level. That way you are able to increase taxes, and this will produce more poverty. See, it's self-supporting. Gun control. Remove the ability to defend themselves from the government. That way you are able to create a police state. You need welfare. Take control of every aspect of their lives: food, housing, and income. Education. Take control of what people read and listen to. Take control of what children learn in school. Religion. Remove the belief in the God from the government and schools. Class warfare. Divide the people into the wealthy and the poor. This will cause more discontent, and it will be easier to take, through taxes, the wealth without the support of the poor, or with the support of the poor. A couple of quotes from Alinsky. All life is warfare, 1972 Playboy interview. That's how these people think. The third rule of the ethics of means and ends is that war in the end justifies almost any means. I told you, he believed the ends justifies the means. Primarily, Alinsky was a disruptor. He taught his followers how to tear down, presumably so they could rebuild. This explains the feminist movement, destroy the family, the environmentalism, destroy private property, the ACLU, that uses supposed civil liberties to undermine individual rights and liberties. It even explains the rainbow jihad, again, destroys the family structure and religion. They all of these things seek to destroy that which upholds the current culture, society, and government. It's all nihilism. There's your common thread. So what you have are many paths to the one goal. They're all striving for the same thing, but they're all arguing over what's the best way to do it. Benito Mussolini started his political career working as a journalist and a political organizer, just like Obama, community organizer. Today, we would call him a community organizer, very similar to what Obama was and did and taught. Remember, Obama taught Alinsky. Very much in line with Alinsky. In fact, the fascine, the symbol of fascism, is a representation of the political power such men can wield when they bundle a large group of individual organizations together. So over here, this fascine, each individual rod is a community group. and he puts them together. That's community. I've organized them into one movement. So the hatchet blades now becomes symbol of the political power. This is the symbol of fascism. Fascism was a word coined by Mussolini using the word fascine, an Italian word. That's what it is, a bundle of sticks. And when you put enough community groups together, you have political power. Okay. You see that? That's the picture of the speaker's, seat in the House of Representatives. On either side of him is a fascine with an axe blade. That's a symbol of fascism right there in the United States government. Yippers. That's our government boasting about their fascism. That's exactly what that is. So, all of these things got codified, turned into a quote-unquote science. The CIA has been using it. Before them, the British. Before them, other people. But the CIA's quote-unquote color revolution, it's a communist thing. And if you don't know the history of the CIA, it was communist from the get-go. Covert U.S. CIA interventions worldwide have resulted in the overthrow or attempted overthrow of more than 50 legitimate governments, despite the agency publicly acknowledging only 7 of these operations. Below are several classic cases of alleged CIA-promoted color revolutions in the past 2 decades since 2003, arranged in chronological order. So we'll drop that. Let me pull this down, if I can get it to pull down. And then we will go here. This is where that article comes from. It's in your homework. The CIA's Color Revolution Hit Parade. Just a few of these. Georgia, the Rose Revolution, 2003. That's actually part of Ukraine, or was. The Orange Revolution in Ukraine, 2004. You're starting to understand the Ukraine war a little bit better now. Ukraine they overthrew the legitimate government, and they've installed a puppet government. And that's what that Biden $8 billion thing was all about too. Ukraine became the place where the Western world's government cronies laundered their money. The Tulip Revolution was in Kyrgyzstan. The Orange Storm was in Azerbaijan. Cedar Revolution was in Lebanon. Cornflower Revolution was Belarus. Saffron Revolution was Myanmar. Green Revolution in Iran. Grape Revolution in Moldova. Melon Revolution in Kyrgyzstan or whatever. Jasmine in Tunisia. Lotus in Egypt. Pearl in Bahrain. Arab Spring, Asia and Africa. Sunflower Revolution, Taiwan region. Revolution of Dignity, Ukraine. This is all, there are patterns to how this works. I'll show it to you here in a minute. Got comment on the board, Natasha, Cedar, Lebanon. Do you think that was intentional? It may well have been, because these people are not stupid, Natasha. The CIA formulated all these ideas into revolution, with a little MK Ultra, Mockingbird, and a host of other things we don't know about thrown in for good measure. And this is what the CIA has always been about since its beginning, the OSS. It's always been about overthrowing other governments. That's why it started. And that's why its charter says it cannot operate within the United States borders, but it does, because nobody enforces it. So now, by now, hopefully you're starting to understand, or you should, the role these men play. George Soros on the left and Bill Gates on the right, both of them here at the World Economic Forum. They are frontmen, boogeymen. They do the work of the people in the background. They do help, but they are the front figures, the face that the public sees. And they do actually help do the work. But now you have to understand that this man, maybe, just maybe, is one of them. And when you understand how a color revolution works, you'll understand why I'm saying he may not be what you think he is. Before the end of the day, I hope to explain this to you and why you'll see this. Or hopefully. There's only one thing worse than trying to get a group of libertarians to agree on anything. That's trying to get a group of narcissistic, self-appointed elites to agree on something. And that's something else here, folks. All of these people are elitists, self-appointed elitists, and they think they're smarter than everybody else in the room. So if I've got 100 of them in a room, I've got 100 smartest people in the room sitting there. And this is why socialism never works. It's because it's never been done right. How's the right way to do it? My way. Because I'm smarter than everybody else that's ever tried it. This is why all of their attempts to do things appear to be working against each other. And sometimes they actually do, but they appear to work against each other, and it creates the appearance of chaos. And to some extent, it is chaos. At the ground level, it is. But that doesn't mean that they don't know what they're doing and that there aren't patterns here, because there are. And hopefully now you understand, or at least you should. Hopefully you should be starting to understand that there are patterns here to what's going on. Whoops, pull that down. Now, real quick, before we go to the break, I'll share this with you. This is what started all this for me. General Flynn, this is from Joe Hoft, Dateline, December 1st, 2025. General Flynn, Obama's CIA director, John Brennan, is likely behind the latest color revolution against President Trump in America. Well, if Brennan's there, so's Obama. We're going to hear more about this Thursday. But talking about a color revolution in America, he's not the only one that's been telling us this. What exactly is a color revolution? This is an excellent article from CDN, Conservative Daily News. I want you to see something. Gina Aveni, September 22nd, 2020. Excuse me. So why? What's going on here? She was warning us that that election, the 2020 election, was a color revolution. And it was. It was. And Trump was a big enemy. And she's going to go through in this article a lot of things. But basically what she's going to tell you is you have to control the media. Well, folks, that's Mark Lloyd. That video I keep playing about the wonderful revolution, glorious revolution in Venezuela, he said that Obama figured out he had to control the media. So you need to control the media. You have to remove religion. Well, by and large, they've done that here in this country. You have to indoctrinate your children, a la John Dewey. Next, criminal justice overhaul. Criminals go free while law-abiding citizens are arrested and charged with crimes. Does that happen in this country now? And George Soros is funding these DAs and assistant DAs, or at least he's the front man. And the judges are just flat out rewriting law. They're rogue. So this has been achieved. And they go through some other things down through here. And there's a report here. I put it in your, a link to it in your homework. This is a report about what they were going to do if Trump actually won the 2020 election, which he did. I don't care what they tell you. He won it. And when you understand by the end of the day, January 6th should make more sense to you. John Kerry was involved in all of this. But it comes down here. These are the points of, and let me go through these real quick, and then we'll go to the break. You have to have a semi-autocratic rather than fully autocratic regime. You have to have an unpopular incumbent, or at least the people have to think he's unpopular. You have to have a united or organized opposition, and your ability to quickly drive home the point that voting results were falsified. You have a complaint independent media to inform citizens, or compliant media to inform citizens about the falsified vote. That's what they were trying to do in 2020. A political opposition capable of mobilizing tens of thousands or more demonstrators to protest electoral fraud, and divisions among the regime's coercive forces, division among the police and the military. That's what the seditious six were doing right there. They're conducting step 7. So when we come back from the break, I'm going to show you, Glenn Beck has done a video on this, on the chalkboard. He's a little Johnny-come-lately to this. But I want to share it with you when we come back from the break. So we're going to go to a 3-minute bottom of the hour break. We got a lot still left to cover. So be back in your seat here in 3 minutes. Natasha. All right, welcome back. Let's, like I said, we got to keep going here. All right. So there is a video in your homework, and it's essentially Glenn Beck on his chalkboard. That's here. I've split screen to this, so it's going to be a little harder for you to read, but all of this is in your homework. This is a 13-minute and 44-second video. Originally, I wanted to play that here on the show today. I don't think I'm going to have time to do it. So what I want to do instead is cover the points he's going to cover. The right chalkboard here are the 7 points that are in this article on the right that we were just reading. On the left, though, is how it's funded. It's funded by your taxpayer dollars, boys and girls, directly and indirectly. This is what USAID, USAID, and then the NGOs and all this other stuff was about. All of this money is being spent to overthrow the government. You're starting to understand why they need the deficit spending, in part to justify taxation. That's how they destroy the middle class. But it's also because that money is then used. It doesn't go to the places they say it goes. It enriches them and their Uber lords, the people behind the scenes that we'll never know. So they take their cut. And then a lot of this is used to actually finish overthrowing the country. The ultimate goal is the destruction of the United States. That's the materialistic goal, the destruction of the United States. So you're going to have a semi-autocratic rather than fully autocratic government. And that's what we have. That's the deep state. Okay. That's why it hasn't fully taken over yet, because they can't. We're still armed. Then you have to have an unpopular incumbent. Now, he doesn't have to necessarily be unpopular. You just have to tell people he's unpopular. This is why the push to try and tell people that MAGA has turned against Trump and the American people don't like Trump and blah, blah, blah. And Trump's poll numbers are down. Push polls, fake polls, lies, all sorts of stuff through the media. You have to have that compliant media. Okay. So they lie to us about why, what people think about or how they feel about Trump, because they need the popular impression that he's unpopular. They have to have that. Then they need a united and organized opposition. Well, they've got that. Okay, that's Occupy Wall Street. That's BLM. That's Antifa. That's No Kings Movement. All of those are staged, and they're funded through USAID and other NGOs using your tax dollars. It's not Soros giving all his money. He's using your money to do all of this. So all of these things are organized, paid for, funded, and we now know this. This is why everybody went after Doge, because in part Elon was finding the financial stream. And that tells you, because the Republicans didn't jump on that immediately, they have majority in both House and Senate, and they have the White House. They didn't jump on that immediately. Tells me that they're actually protecting that. And when they pass the continuing resolution, all that money Doge identified and supposedly quit spending is in that continuing resolution. So they just reauthorized it when they did that. And the Republicans took a victory lap for this. Another reason I think that Trump may actually be a stalking horse. Okay, number 4, you have to have an ability to quickly to drive home the point that the voting results were falsified. Now, this is where what they were probably hoping for was that Trump would win the 2020 election. And then they could say, wait a minute, it was a falsified election. It was fraud. Now, something in their plan went wrong there. I firmly believe this. And so what they had to do is they had to counter. It ended up going the other way. Okay. It ended up being a falsified election for Biden. Now, I don't know if this was legitimate, okay, and they had to steal the election from Trump, or whether or not it was the Republicans using a color, the right wing of the progressive movement using a color revolution against the left wing of the progressive movement. I don't know which way that goes. We can't, not with the information that's publicly available to us. But we know the pattern well enough to understand some of the panic. Then you have to have a compliant, independent media. Well, it doesn't have to be independent. A compliant media that you control. In this case, the mainstream media, legacy media. That's been in the Democrat pocket since Walter Lippmann, since Woodrow Wilson's day. So 120 years. And what they're going to do is immediately inform the citizens of the false vote. So had Trump won, they would have immediately said, look, there was voter fraud, blah, 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 blah. Trump stole the election. And that's to get the people to revolt against him. Well, what happened instead is Biden's group stole the election, and Trump called them out for it, Trump's administration, and that's what January 6th was all about. January 6th was an attempt to put down the pushback. Now, that pushback was using the same pattern or the same techniques that the color revolution uses, only it was using it against the left wing of the deep state. I can't tell you all the details about that. I can't. Remember what I asked you to do. You have to look at this as an intelligence analyst. Do I see the pattern? Oh, yeah, I do. Yes, I do, just in reverse. Does it explain what I saw with the falsified election, the stolen election, and the way the media covered it in the January 6th story? Oh, yeah, explains all of that. Now I understand why January 6th was a false flag. They needed those people to react that way. They had to. Otherwise, they would have been the ones toppled for stealing the election. So they were clinging to their power as best they could at that moment. They were vulnerable. Number 6, you have to have a political opposition capable of mobilizing tens of thousands or more of demonstrators to protect electoral fraud. We've got that. And in part, that's the bulk of the people who do not work for a living. And that's part of what the lockdowns did. The reason we have such a shortage in manpower is because all of the American lazies that were working quit working during COVID, and now they're on the government dole. They become the workforce. I've shown you the little blue book that was written in France, the 12 subversives. They all got arrested for that book. And it was a blueprint for how to undermine it was a color revolution blueprint for the French government, how to overthrow the French government. One of the things they said in there is we need as many people on welfare as possible so that they don't have to work and they can be used as this labor force, this mob, rent-a-mob. That's what these rent-a-mobs are. And they're being paid with your tax dollars. And that's why I'm telling you that all of these different, Occupy, BLM, Antifa, that's just a fake story. All of the reasons for the riot are fake. What they need is the riot to delegitimize and destabilize the existing government. Finally, you need division amongst the regime's coercive forces, division amongst the police and military. By coercive, you have to divide the people who carry the sword for the government. That's what the Subversive Six is doing. Okay, they are undermining the military's confidence in Trump. And that's what all of this stuff with attacking the police is about. Now, the police don't trust the government. They don't trust the people. All of this is turning us against each other. It's all done intentionally. And by the way, right now, if you do a Google search, you'll find experts say the seditious six did not commit treason. Oh, yes, heck, they did. Yes, they did. I'm going to tell you right now, I was in the United States military. There's something called the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Conduct. It affects people differently if you're in the government than it does if you're a civilian. So if you're a civilian, you have more rights than you do in the military. But if you're in the military, I don't have to prove your intent. If I'm before a military tribunal and I can show that you're following a pattern of subversion and that you are attacking the chain of command, I can get convicted. And if the attack on the chain of command was intended to undermine and overthrow the government, the Constitution calls that treason, and I can execute you. And they committed treason because every one of those six in that video, they set out their bona fides to tell you that they had the authority to be speaking on this, telling people you don't have to follow unlawful orders. Well, folks, every member of the military is taught that in boot camp and OCS, Officers Candidate School. But they're also taught what a lawful order is and isn't. So the seditious six knew what they were doing. And now they've come out and say, oh, well, yeah, Trump hasn't issued any unlawful orders yet. That's that mea culpa that people have been allowed to get away with forever and ever. Oh, I apologize. You shot him in the head. Oh, it was a mistake. Oh, okay, well, go away. Now, if I did that, I shot him in the head. Well, you're going to jail, Joe. We're going to kill you. We're going to execute you. Why? I said I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, but you're not part of the protected class. That's part of this whole system. It's all to make us not trust anybody or anything. And they're doing very well with it. Now, other stories, I don't know. I think I put this one in there. I may not have put it in your homework, but this is Hegseth. Seditious Six video was politically motivated influence operation. Yes, it's part of a color revolution. Then the article about the CIA's overthrow, et cetera, et cetera. Now, real quick, you're going to find this page in your homework if you want to look at it. I feel like I wanted to put it in there. And I wrote a note for you, a warning note. There's a lot of truth in these articles, a great deal of truth in these articles. Even the part where they blame Jews for some of this stuff. It's true. It's true. A lot of this is headed up by Jewish people of Jewish heritage. Not, I wouldn't say they were practicing Orthodox Jews. They're not following their religion. But to the extent, like right here, how the British invented communism, blamed it on the Jews. The bulk of the information in that article is actually factually accurate. Even the connection to Jews. But don't turn this into anti-Semitism. Just because they're Jewish, that you shouldn't hate the Jews. It made it convenient for Hitler and other people. It's convenient today to blame the Jews. There's a reason that the Jews do this. They're apostates. They're godless. It's no different than the northern and southern kingdoms turning against Yahweh and chasing after other gods. We were told to expect this from Yahweh's people. There's the yin and the yang within everybody. Even Gentiles Paul tells us there are Gentiles who naturally do the requirements of Yahweh's laws without ever having to know the law. They just do. They follow the 10 Commandments. So this is a big theological discussion. I don't want to get into it right now. It's not the point. But if you want to take a deep dive into this, this is very good information here for the factual points. You just, like the note I put in there, be aware of his biases and his personal opinions. But it's a good work. And then also related to what we're talking about here, this story here is from today. Judges break the law to stop Trump from enforcing the law. You know, I gotta destroy capitalism to save capitalism. Well, first of all, you don't have to break the law to save the country. And in this case, this is just more of what I'm telling you. You have to look at this through the mask or the filter I've been trying to explain to you. You have to kind of look at this as a intelligence operative who understands how a color revolution works and is looking for indications that that's what's being carried out against the United States, both the people and its government. I see all of those signs. It explains a lot. So I'm not asking you to accept or embrace my theory here. What I'm asking you to do is view all of these events, all of these people and the things that we see them doing, and understand that that could be a psyop in and of itself. That could be false news, false information. It could be a disinformation campaign. And that's this attack on censorship and disinformation. It's part of what that is. It's all meant to get to the point where nobody can trust anybody for anything or about anything. All of that filtered through this lens that I'm telling you fits. The mosaic starts to come into focus. Cloudy, because I'm missing a lot of pieces. Is it a perfect theory? No. But does it fit the facts on the ground? Oh, heck yeah. How far back does it go? A long way back. I can take this back into at least the 1700s. Say, well, you know, like if you go read that one link I was telling you about, well, the British are behind all this. Oh, Joe, yes, they are. That's what Rhodes Scholars are all about. The Rhodes Scholarship was the British version of Woodrow Wilson's elite university. It was meant to get American elites to go over to England where they could be programmed according to the English desires. If I'm not mistaken, Bill Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar. The whole idea there is, what was it? Something's kindergarten is what that group of people was called. You have to know history. Cicero tells us, man, you've got to know your history. And if you don't, you're going to be doomed to live the life of a child forever. And that's because you don't understand how the past drives the present. The past shapes the future. You got to know them, and you got to be able to weave these things together. So what I'm trying to explain to you Is it sound, valid, and rational? Is it consistent and coherent? Does it explain the things you see? Does it help you predict the things that might be coming? If the premises that I've given you are true, then the answer to all of those questions is yes. Can you give me a better explanation? No, you can't. The better explanation is going to be, oh, Joe, you're full of crap, and all of this is just coincidence and just the chaos of life. Really? That's a cop-out, because nothing in this world is just coincidence and happenstance. Everything that happens, especially politically, remember what FDR told you? If it happens in politics, you can bet it was planned that way. Honor the threat. So you're telling me that all these things happening in politics are just coincidences? No, I don't. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. I reject that, because I know human nature and I know history too well to fall for that line of thinking or that line of reasoning. So I see a plan to destroy the United States materially. That's because the communists want to rule the world. Spiritually, well, what two nations has the world wanted to destroy since they were invoked? Well, the nation of Israel and the nation of the United States of America. All the others are just food on the plate. They're to be gobbled up for their resources. Not necessarily destroyed, but controlled. They want to destroy the United States and, for the most part, the Western world. But they don't have to focus on Europe anymore. Europe has fallen. They don't have to focus on the United Kingdom anymore. The United Kingdom has fallen. They don't have to focus on Canada. Canada has fallen. They don't have to focus on Australia or New Zealand. They have fallen. They've won all of them. They're all dead. They're gone. Spiritually gone. The only two places left, and we are barely thumping along here in the United States, it's the United States and Israel. And Israel is, by and large, apostate right now. But that's irrelevant. The scriptures tell us that Yahweh always keeps a remnant. And it's that remnant, for that remnant, that Yahweh fights. So if I look at this, what I've just explained to you, and I say, how do humans keep all of this going across 2 or 3 centuries, consistently always moving the football in the same direction, never backwards? You know, the Democrats advance the ball and the Republicans play defense. It's a ratchet and latch thing. The Republicans keep you from going backwards. Just like Trump. Okay, I want to undermine confidence in our government. Has Trump arrested any of his enemies yet? No, not really. None of the big boys or big girls have gone into jail. They have all the evidence they need to arrest Hillary Clinton. They're going to screw around, and then they're going to say, oh, well, we had her now. We finally got that hardcore case, but the statute of limitations has expired. That's not a mistake. If it happens in politics, it's planned that way. Beat that into your head. And it's not just liberals. It's the deep state. The Republicans are playing a part. You've got to accept this. If you don't, you are still in their camp. You're still doing what they want you to do. You're still in the matrix. If you think the Republicans are somehow different, you are still in the matrix. They just fooled you into thinking that pill was red. It was actually blue. And you went back to sleep. Now, can humans maintain all of this advance, this attack, this progress? Because when you look at it from a 50,000-foot view, I see the velocity vectors all pointing toward the destruction of the United States incrementally, because they can't overthrow us by revolution. That would be the surest way in the world to get the rednecks to rise up, and they would whoop your butt overnight. Largest army the world has. It would end quick. Even the United States military couldn't hold up against them. So they have to do this incrementally. Well, humans cannot do this. It is beyond human capacity to work to this extent of coordination for this extended time for the same goal. That's one of the reasons I know that the Bible is exactly what it claims to be, because it was written over 1,500 years from some 60 authors and still has the same story. It's one of the reasons that I discount the deuterocanonical books, the extra biblical books. People say, well, the Bible was, sola scriptura is a bad thing, and all these books were excluded because they make the Bible into a mumble jumble. They were excluded because they don't agree with Moses and sound doctrine, which means they are the teachings of men, not the work of the Holy Spirit. Anyway, not to give you a scripture lesson on this, but I was going to ask you, how's your spiritual warfare going? Because everything I just explained to you can only be tied together if you see the hidden hand of the spiritual world behind it. Because if this was just secular humanist agenda, communism trying to take over the world, it would have fallen apart by now. Because, look, the secular humanist agenda of the founding of the United States died with the founding fathers. To the extent that they were doing things for their own intentions, their will died with them, with the initial generation. It died when they started taking over and running the place. That's why we almost fell apart early on. The sedition laws and all this other stuff. It dies with the man who pushes it. When Lenin died, Stalin took over. Well, he was his disciple, but Stalin ran a very different country from Lenin eventually. He ran an empire. Lenin wasn't after an empire at the time. He was just wanting to take over Russia. Stalin expanded. And ever since then, one person after another, they remake everything. When you understand that everything I've been trying to explain to you fits together consistently, coherently, no contradictions. Appears to be a contradiction, but it isn't. It's just many different intellectuals thinking that they are the only ones that know how to make socialism work. And they're all fighting their own little battles. But the one thing upon which they can and will unite is their goal of destroying the United States, which is why the left always seems to walk in lockstep. Well, see, Joe, the right is different. They never walk in lockstep. Don't they, though? If their role is just defense, they only need a few well-protected rhinos to play defense from time to time. It's exactly what happens. Have you ever noticed that they never have a supermajority on either party? That never happens, no matter what's going on in the country. Well, if the world in which we're living operated on face value, when Trump got into office, MAGA should have swept the board. Should have had a supermajority in both the House and Senate, but it didn't happen. You think that's an accident? I don't. But that's just me. All right, I have run out of things to say today. And unless there are comments or questions on the board, or anybody has anything from me. Yes, I see Foxy Joe. I saw I need scriptural guidance. Amen, amen, amen. Hopefully this class helped. There'll be more on this Thursday. There's a second half of this. There's another shoe to drop that I haven't even touched on today. It's another color revolution, or a form of a color revolution. Let's talk about the Arab Spring and Obama and Islam on Thursday. Because what the left has been trying to do to the United States, Islam is currently doing to the left. And the left can't fight it because the left is aligned with Islam. And in order to do anything about it, they would have to confess their guilt. And the minute they do that, they're dead. The United States will have their lunch. There's still enough decent people that if they ever realize the left willingly sold us out to the Muslim jihadis, the political bloodbath would be beyond belief. So what you see now is just a bunch of people trying to loot the coffers for everything they can get before they have to run for the hills. Problem is, there's going to be nowhere to run. They just don't realize that yet. Arrogance, hubris of narcissistic people. All right, folks. I'll continue this on Thursday. Tomorrow, if you're a scripture believer and you're going to join us for Worship Wednesday, I have a different conversation to have with you about much the same thing. The revolution that's going on within the visible church right now, and the fighting within our family, within the body of Christ, and the deceptions. Oh my gosh. So we'll have a very frank and candid discussion about that tomorrow. Thursday, we'll pick up and continue where we left off here today. We'll talk about the other side of this coin, the other shoe that hasn't dropped. So until then, till we see each other again, I thank you for being here. Love each and every one of you. Hope we're edifying you. Hope we're helping you. Hope we're teaching something that's useful to you, or if nothing else, to help you understand your world. Because I firmly believe what I discussed today is closer to the truth than anything else I've heard out there. It puts all the pieces together, not just a few of them. I can explain dang near anything you bring me. It fits in that paradigm. So, until we see each other again, y'all stay safe, take care of yourself. And if you don't mind, hit the like buttons and share the show. Bye-bye.